They called him the ghost of the valley. For 50 years, Elias hadn't spoken a single word to his neighbors. Not a hello, not a thank you, not even a scream when the local boys threw stones at his windows. He was the village joke, until the day the mountain began to move, and they realized his silence wasn't a choice. It was a warning. We live in a world that never stops talking. We value the loudest voice in the room, the quickest retort, the boldest claim. But what if the most important thing you'll ever hear is the thing that is never said? Today, we look at the life of Elias Thorne, a man who traded his voice for something far more heavy. The village of Oak Haven sat in the shadow of the gray peaks. It was a picturesque place, but narrow-minded, and at the edge of the woods lived Elias. He was a stone cutter by trade. Every day, the rhythmic clink, clink, clink of his hammer was the only sign of life from his cabin. He was old, his back curved like a question mark, his hands calloused into leather. The villagers had theories. Some said he was a criminal hiding his past. Others said he'd lost his mind when his wife passed decades ago. But there was one thing no one could explain. Every night, at exactly midnight, Elias would walk to the base of the Great Dam, the only thing protecting the village from the reservoir above, and he would press his ear to the cold stone for hours. The summer of 26 was the wettest on record. The rains didn't just fall, they assaulted the earth. The reservoir was groaning. While the village mayor threw parties celebrating the bountiful water, Elias stopped cutting stone. He began carrying heavy crates of iron and lead up to the dam. He worked in the mud, his breath ragged, his eyes bloodshot. The mayor, a man who loved his own voice, confronted Elias. "You're trespassing, old man. Move your junk or I'll have the guards throw you in the cells." Elias just looked at him. His lips parted, his throat hitched as if a lifetime of words were fighting to get out. But he said nothing. He simply pointed at a tiny hairline fracture in the concrete. The mayor laughed. That's been there for years. You finally lost it." That night, the tremor started. Not big enough to wake the village, but enough to make the dishes rattle. Elias didn't go home. He stood in the pouring rain, leaning his entire body weight against the iron plates he had bolted to the wall. The village council decided Elias was a public nuisance. They claimed his repairs were actually damaging the dam's integrity. They sent the sheriff to arrest him. As the sheriff reached for the handcuffs, the ground gave a sickening thud, a sound like a bone snapping deep underground. The sheriff froze. What was that? Elias didn't look at him. He looked up at the millions of tons of water held back by a wall that was now vibrating. He grabbed the sheriff's lapels, the first time he had touched another human in years, and pointed frantically toward the mountain. The sheriff pulled away, annoyed. "If you want to talk, Elias, use your tongue. Otherwise, get in the damn car." Elias opened his mouth. His jaw shook. A raspy, haunting sound came out. Not a word, but a moan of pure agony. He turned and ran not away from the village, but deeper into the tunnels beneath the dam. The sheriff followed, fueled by anger and curiosity. Deep in the bowels of the structure, he found Elias. The old man wasn't crazy, he was a genius. The walls were covered with handwritten charts, decades of acoustic data. Elias hadn't been listening to the dam like a madman. He had been monitoring the frequency of the stone. He knew the dam was built on a fault line the architects had missed. The sheriff realized the iron plates Elias had been installing weren't just patches. They were conductors designed to vibrate and release the pressure of the gas pockets forming in the bedrock. But then the sheriff saw the most shocking thing of all, a journal open on the desk. The last entry, dated 30 years ago, read, "The day I promised her." Elias's wife hadn't died of illness. She had died during the dam's construction. Elias had discovered the flaw then, but no one listened. He had made a vow. He would never speak another word to a world that wouldn't listen to the truth. He would only speak through his work. Suddenly, a siren wailed. The primary seal had breached. This was it. The moment the valley would be erased. Water began spraying through the cracks like bullets. The sheriff panicked, heading for the exit, but Elias grabbed a massive iron lever. It was the manual release for the emergency spillway, a mechanism that had been rusted shut for half a century. It required the strength of 3 men. Elias, 80 years old and frail, threw his entire soul into the metal. The lever wouldn't budge. The water was at their knees. The sheriff joined him, screaming, "It's no use! We have to run!" Elias looked at the sheriff. For the first time in 50 years, his eyes cleared. The sorrow vanished, replaced by a terrifying resolve. He didn't scream. He didn't cry for help. He leaned into the sheriff's ear and whispered 4 words, the only 4 words he had saved for 5 decades. "Hold the line, son." With a roar that surpassed the sound of the crashing water, Elias's muscles surged. The sound of metal grinding on metal echoed through the chamber. The lever gave way. The spillway roared open. The pressure vanished. The village was saved. But the force of the release, the sheer kinetic energy of the water, shook the catwalk. Elias, exhausted and spent, lost his footing. They found Elias 2 miles downstream the next morning. He looked peaceful, his hands finally still. The village of Oakhaven didn't celebrate that day. They mourned. The mayor resigned in shame. The sheriff spent the rest of his life telling the story of the man who saved thousands with a whisper. They turned Elias's cabin into a library, a place of study and quiet. At the entrance, they placed a statue of the stonecutter, not with a hammer in his hand, but with a finger to his lips. The dam was rebuilt, correctly this time, using Elias's notes. The valley remained safe for generations, but more importantly, the people of Oakhaven learned a lesson that changed their culture forever. We often mistake silence for weakness, or a lack of words for a lack of wisdom, but Elias Thorne taught us that the deepest truths don't need to be shouted. They are lived, they are built, and sometimes they are sacrificed for. Are you listening to the quiet people in your life, or are you waiting for your turn to speak? If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. It helps us keep telling stories of the unsung heroes who move the world in silence. Comment, "I am listening," below if you've ever learned a hard lesson from someone who didn't say a word. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the human spirit.